You have since been knighted for your services to acting. You are a Knight of the British Empire, and you are still a lifelong socialist. And I wonder if there's a contradiction in that.
I see no contradiction at all. I see...
That "sir" doesn't set you apart in a way that...
I work quite hard to not let it. I look on it as an acknowledgement of my work and of British theatre. I got an OBE 11 years ago, 12 years ago, and it was the same with that. And I'm joining a group of artists, performers, who I have admired all of my life, some of them friends. And I feel that this honor not only enhances me, but it enhances the acting profession. Do you believe that?
It doesn't matter what I believe.
It is actually true. I mean, it sounds like a line, but it's true.
Okay. And I want to ask you, because you talked about the campaigning for the Labour Party at the last election. There have been quite a few changes since then. They didn't win. They have a new leader. You have spent a lot of the time in the States, as we said, and Al Gore said of you that if he had listened to your advice, then he perhaps might have ended up in the White House. And I know, and you've said in the past that actually if Gordon Brown had asked you, you would have been happily advised him on presentation. What advice would you give to Ed Miliband?
Al Gore is very sweet to have said that. And I did, because I'm not a citizen of the United States, so I could not vote for Al, and I could not even actively campaign on his behalf. It would have been suspect having a resident alien doing that. But the result of the 2000 election was devastating, as was the one that followed it too. Yes, if asked, I would be very happy to give any advice that I could give to any politician who I admire and respect, and that's certainly the case with Ed. It's well known that I campaigned for his brother, very much so during that the leadership campaign. David was somebody I supported very actively and vocally.
Can you advise somebody like, I mean, you look at what we know about Ed Miliband, can you give advice on presentation that makes a difference?
I feel I could. Look how successful it was for Maggie Thatcher.
One of the things that you've talked about is support for the charity Refuge, which campaigns against domestic violence and supports those who are victims of it. And you've written very movingly about why you did that, and that's because of your own experiences when you were young. And you said, I knew exactly, and we should paint the picture, I suppose, that you're in a home with your brothers, your mother, your father, in a very small house. And you said, I knew exactly when the shouting was done and a hand was about to be raised. I also knew exactly when to insert a small body between the fist and her face, a skill no child should ever have to learn. Which is a remarkable statement.
It was the reality of some of the time when I was growing up. And so when I was invited by Refuge to become a patron, I could do it without hesitation, because I do it for my mother, because I could not help her very much then. I was not able to. Now I'm able to give some support and encouragement to women like my mother, because domestic violence continues to be a massive, unspoken of problem around the world, of course, but here in all societies, all classes, all educational backgrounds, all economic backgrounds, it doesn't make any difference. People often think of domestic violence, well, it happens in council estates. No, not at all. It happens everywhere. And it is this silent crime because people are ashamed to speak about it. I was ashamed. I was ashamed every Monday morning when I left my house and walked to school, because I knew people knew what had been happening, and it was shaming.
They knew because of the noise coming from your house.
Yeah, because we were a very tight community, and we lived in what was called a one up, one down. One room downstairs, one room upstairs. So it was impossible to live privately.
And you and your brother were sharing a bed in the same room as your parents?
Well, we had a sort of partitioned off room, which would have been part of my parents' bedroom.
But did you really insert yourself between your mother and your father to stop him hitting her?
Sometimes.
And did he hit you as a result?
No, never. Never. It would work, what I would do. It was as though my father was an extraordinary man, 1945 Regimental Sergeant Major of the Parachute Regiment, a superstar who came out of the war, out of the military, into semi-skilled work. What a fall. And he was frustrated and angry and bitter. And at weekends he drank. And it was the alcohol that made the difference.
You're talking about it now and you're campaigning for your refuge, but you've also said that such experiences are destructive. In my adult life, I've struggled to overcome the bad lessons of my father's behaviour, this corrosive example of male irresponsibility. What did you mean by that?
I can perhaps best answer that by making a metaphor. As an actor, there was one set of emotions that I always struggled with. And for years and years and years, I faked. And that was anger. I knew so well how much of it lay inside me and could, with little provocation, emerge. And so, as an actor, I kept that side of me sealed, lidded, shut down. And so I faked it. I faked it for years. I became quite good at faking it. I don't do that anymore now because one of the nice things about living in California was that I got some excellent therapy. You can get it here in London too, but I did. So all of this got worked out, over years and years of working with therapists. And I found that it was possible on stage to express murderousness, rage, fury, hostility, all of those things, and nothing bad would happen. But in my own life, I have had to restrain myself sometimes because the response of violence, which is a choice that men make, it can be controlled. Was always a choice for me, and I was able always, most of the time, to make the right choice, which is do nothing. Have the feelings and do nothing about them.
You also said that one of the most oppressive aspects as a result of this was the experience of loneliness, which seems...
Yes.
And you mentioned it a few times, actually, in various comments that you've made, which seems surprising.
Well, even though neighbours would at times help, and there was my brother who was 5 years older than me, and so he could at times be absent from some of this because he was older. I felt utterly isolated, especially during those minutes, sometimes as long as an hour, of monitoring the temperature of the room. Then I think I felt loneliest of all because there was nobody else to do it. It's ghastly that any child should be in that position, and they are today. And so talking about it is the only thing to do, and campaigning, as Refuge does, to get domestic violence taken far more seriously by the courts, by the police. In my house, I heard a policeman say, "Mr. Stewart, it makes two to make an argument." Wrong, Mr. Policeman, wrong. Only one. If you're an unhappy, violent man, as my father became. But, the other great thing about Dad is that I finally come to acknowledge that he's in everything I do. When I played Macbeth for a year, just 3 years ago, the very last thing I would do would be to put on my military cap, take my AK-47 in my hand and look in the mirror and just give a nod to my father, because there he was looking straight back at me. I had a little moustache, just like his. And it was a long time before I understood why I had worn this little moustache. Why should Macbeth have a moustache? Because it's Dad, that's why.
Sir Patrick Stewart, thank you for coming on Hard Talk.
I'm happy to be here.